Hello, everyone. What's going on? It's a wonderful, warm afternoon here in Southern California, here in Los Angeles. So, this live recording of what will be a free video is for paid subscribers today. So, if you'd like to join me for live recordings of some of these more exclusive interactions with me, where we'll have a smaller chat room for the paid subscribers. Please subscribe. Now, for others who have who are of limited means, fixed incomes, I'm always giving out free paid subscriptions to those who reach out to me who simply would like to enjoy the content that I put out, but it's beyond their financial means. I don't want anyone to ever feel guilty about asking for that. People reach out to me all the time, and I'm more than happy to comp people's subscriptions. So, with that said, let's get started. I want to, it's been a while since we've done one of these videos, and we have a lot to talk about. Since I ended the Crisis Papers series, the notes I've been putting out at the circus, such as they are, have taken a somewhat more philosophical turn, very deliberately. I wanted to, as I described in some of the writing that I've put out, have a bit of shift in register on what I'm writing about for now, which is kind of coming back a little bit more to sort of the foundations of the philosophy which propels me to write here at Notes from the Circus, such as it is. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And I have a bunch of thoughts on my mind coming out of the piece that I'm working on right now, which I might get out today. And I want to talk a little bit too, to my subscribers about like my writing process. I'm always surprised. A lot of you reach out to me and suggest that maybe I'm overworking myself with the amount of content I put out. I want to disabuse anybody of any worry that I'm overworked, I'm overworking myself. That's not the case. If anything, I actually have a lot of writing that I do ongoing. I have a lot of essays that land are essays that I work on a sort of like touch and go type basis. So like right now I have three essays that are based on ideas that I've had, conversations I've had with other intellectual interlocutors, people in my life, sometimes in relation to news stories, things that I find interesting, for which I think I might have something to say within my philosophical view. And so sometimes I will have several pieces that are currently on development. Sometimes these pieces will just sort of die on the chopping block. I mean, they won't actually make it to publication. There's a lot of draft essays I've written that just never got published, and there's some that that are in development now that I think are interesting. And so one of my practice at Notes from the Circus is I'm not like trying to be like a traditional newsletter. I'm trying to do something that's kind of radical. In some ways, I treat Notes from the Circus as sort of like a public journal of my thoughts, my intellectual thoughts, if you will. And and to the extent that people find that interesting and want to read those things, I find that great. I recently did a reader survey And I've gotten somewhere on the range of 250 or so responses back from people. And one thing that sort of, it's not a majority complaint. I'm quite, it would seem that most people are happy with the content I'm putting out. But I do want to sort of speak to some of the feedback I've gotten from some of my readers. A lot of my readers think I put out too much content, and they feel guilty not having the time to read all of it, and they wish I would sort of slow down and post less. Um, I like I find this is one of the more like interesting pieces of feedback that I've sort of sat with, because in some senses, like, I actually have a lot more content I could put out, because I'm writing all the time. Like, I'm journaling all the time. And in some senses, like, what ends up on Notes from the Circus is really just a curated display of like a sort of like broader, canon of work that I'm constantly doing. I probably easily do 7 to 8 hours of writing per day. And some people have, asked if I'm writing a book. I am writing a book, and a lot of this, a lot of my work is directed, towards a corpus which will become a manuscript. And some of that gets sectioned off and edited down, and yes, like, sometimes and often I work with, like, modern writing tools, like, Claude and such, to help with research, um and considering different ways of like presenting various different problems, like, so I'm a modern writer using modern tools that are available to me. um and uh and so when you know I I to those who say that I'm putting out too much content, I just want to say, like, I don't like, it's fine. Like, I mean, if you feel like there's too much to take in, then don't take it all in, right? I mean, take what you can, and not what you can't. But I mean, you know, I'm I'm doing a project here at Notes from the Circus, that's uh it's my own, project, one that I'm sharing with the world, uh uh that's driven by my curiosity and my sense of moral purpose. And there's some things that I want to put out there. So, um as to those who are sort of asking me to slow down and put out less content because they find it overwhelming, I'm not sure that I can grant that request, because part of me getting this out there is as much for me as it may be for you. It's part of the corpus of work that I'm building towards. And like I said, part of that is driving towards being the manuscript for a book. So yes, that's happening. Now, for those who are sort of worried that I'm working myself to death, I mean, I would ask you to sort of put that concern to rest. I mean, I'm quite well rested. I'm quite calm. I, I think a lot of people, when they see how much writing I'm doing, they sort of like imagine themselves like cramming for, like, an essay, in high school or college, and think about how stressful that may be. I just want people to know, like, I feel like I've always loved writing, like, since a young age. Like, if you give me, like, a blank page and just like my imagination, I'm more than happy to sit and just sort of write. I find it actually quite calming. I mean, to write. I write too much. Like, some people say my pieces are too wordy, that I repeat myself. So, for those who are worried that about me working myself to death, I would suggest no. I mean, my writing in some ways is like a form of relaxation for me. So to that feedback that I see in the reader survey, I would suggest you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that for me. I like to write. Um, Anyways, with all that said, there was some other like interesting feedback that I want to, some stuff that stuck out to me in the reader survey. Some people, you know, there's a few people who've suggested that they're a bit turned off by how preachy I can seem. People feel like they're being scolded, that they're being made to feel guilty in some way. That was a theme that has come up in some of the feedback. I had an optional sort of like tell me something that you want me to know, and a few people, as I read through the comments, pointed to this sort of sense that I was like making them feel bad about themselves somehow, guilty. I was curious. I mean, I haven't. I haven't like reached out to any of these people for clarification on why they may feel that way. Um, I am not trying to make anyone feel guilty. Um, that said, I mean, I feel guilty about things I've done in my life, right? I think like one of the keystones of being a morally serious person is keeping track of the of your moral failings in life and using those things as sort of totems of learning, right? Like what did I learn of that moral failing? Like how do I be better, right? How do I you know avoid making those mistakes? Um so like here's the thing, right? Like I don't fully live up to my own philosophy. I don't. I'm like I am a human. And to err is human, as the saying goes. And sometimes I fall short of my own stated virtues. We all do. This is just like who we are. And I think the sign of character is one who recognizes when they fall short of their own virtues, and they use that as an opportunity to learn to better themselves. That's what I try to do. And I try to point that out. um y- you know there's some people um in the feedback that have also sort of suggested that I'm kind of incorrigible. I thought this was really interesting too, because I mean, like one of the major themes of my writing over the past year has been on sort of really revisiting a lot of my sort of you know technocratic and technocratic thinking, right? Like I've sort of called myself a reformed technocratic liberal. And a lot of the viewpoints that I now aggressively attack are viewpoints I once held, right? So I'm in some sense attacking a past version of myself, which makes the sort of incorrigible, charge against me an interesting one. I'm not sure where that comes from. I mean, I think the fact that like I'm even having this argument, um, uh, which is sort of, uh, in contrast with the sort of temporal prior of me, is strange. So I mean, I obviously, I think, demonstrably, even within the last year, even from when I started Notes from the Circus just over a year ago to now, I mean, there have been several times where I have indicated positions that I have moved on, and and I have indicated that I've changed my mind about things quite publicly and openly. So I think what people mean when they say I'm incorrigible is that I'm not giving ground to positions that people hold that they themselves are unwilling to examine because they don't like the cognitive dissonance that my interventions so strongly made, and without proper deference to sort of this idea that there's like multiple valid viewpoints, or that there exists some sort of like objective like observer position, this some balls and strikes position, which I have disdain for, right? That Jason Calacanis, from the All In podcast, likes to pretend that he is like the master of. Like, I just like this sense that like I am not corrigible, that like I am overly aggressive in my arguments, to the extent that like people can't have a reasonable discussion with me, which is what I hear from a lot of people, like like former friends, people who just feel really attacked by me. Like, I mean, I feel like they're gaslighting me, quite honestly, at this point. Like, I mean, look, I'm not trying to defend myself. Like, I honestly don't give a shit what these people think about me. I just think it's like fascinating that people would view me here as being sort of incorrigible, sort of being so self-absorbed in some need to be right about the things that I'm saying, that I'm unwilling to sort of hear any sort of counter perspective. Um, I am more than willing to. I mean, look, I'm very hungry for people who might have arguments that would do violence on my assumptions. If you have them, I welcome them. I want to hear them. I will engage with them seriously. Um, in fact, there is like a long list of people who have challenged me quite openly, and many examples on social media over the last 12 months, that have made sort of broad pronouncements of that I'm lying, that I'm exaggerating, that I'm misrepresenting facts, that I'm a conspiracy theorist. And to these people, I have like said, like, well, then like publicly debate me. Like if you believe that like what I'm saying is so obviously a fabrication, a confabulation of of facts, like towards some unsupportable you know constellation of innuendo that you think I have like constructed into a convenient narrative to support my ideological priors, which seems to be what they're saying, then I mean, I want to hear why they think that, but they just basically, when I challenge them, they're like, "Come on, you're wrong." Like they can never actually like explain to me why they're wrong. They invite me to sort of just reconsider my position without actually advancing a counter, without a riposte. And then these people tell me that I can't be reasoned with. It's very strange that these people then, in the next move, and this is where I'm going to go next, and because I think this is like an interesting conversation of itself, then have the observation that like I have let my ego go to my head, and that I am demonstrating that I am a narcissist. That We're going to talk about narcissism today. I know people don't, some people don't like it when I talk about this because they think I'm defending myself. I really don't give a fuck if you think I'm a narcissist. I don't care. But I'm talking about it um, because it says something about the people who would think I'm a narcissist more than it says about me. And that's actually what I want to explore here. Because I think like, there's some things about the nature of consciousness, the nature of language, and the fact that, in order to have communication, there must be a subject of that communication, as sort of a basis for like creating a communicative information at all, right? And that sort of ultimately boils down to some kind of situatedness, some sort of conscious experience, something that we would describe as our personal identity. And here this thing gets fraught. I know that, like, in this place there's a whole bunch of different philosophical views. I'm familiar with, like, all of them, really. I mean, I especially, Daniel Dennett's, the late Daniel Dennett's, compatibilist view on this, right? Which tries to sort of, make peace with the sort of problems that the sort of the sort of the Cartesian dualistic, frame of, the academy and science in particular, has been attached to for over 3 centuries. I mean, I have like a direct metaphysical disagreement with the framing of that problem, for example. And some people might think that that's very abstract. What the fuck are you talking about, Mike? But I think it's, like, really crucial, I think, here, to talk about it a little bit. And I have been talking about it. My essays of late have been very much about this idea about, the heuristics we have in our conversation and our social mores about, like, how to sort of, like, spot selfishness, this sort of sense that, like, I think I'm more important than you, because, like, the that I think of my own life, my own wants and desires as primary, and the wants and desires of the people around me and in my community as secondary to that, right? Like, I mean, like, that is, I think, like, we wouldn't debate, is, like, the contours of what I think a narcissistic personality is. So narcissism is not talking about yourself, or tending to oneself's, own sense of identity, as a a communicative act, is not narcissistic in principle, right? I mean, you are, like, you have this concept of self, right? And it is from that concept of self that you build thoughts in relation to other things vis-a-vis yourself. And that you might, especially if, like me, like, you're really sort of trying to think about these things in phenomenological terms, right? Like, you're going to be thinking about yourself a lot, because it's yourself from which, you stand and look out into the world. And so, like, thinking about yourself and what you are, and how you relate to that world, I think, especially in the sort of the aesthetic of the contemporary academy and the Cartesian worldview, is sort of seen as sort of, like, on its face, to sort of be a narcissistic act, because there's this idea that comes from Cartesian dualism, that, like, there's like two worlds, right? There's like, and we talked about this, right? There's the external world and there's the internal world. And the external world is what's real, and the internal world is really just a bunch of, like, symbols and like constructed meaning that points to the real things that are in the real world. This is like materialism. This is Rene Descartes, right? And, like, that gives you this sort of instinct that, like, if you're being objective, you have to remove the subjective from the frame. So somebody who's talking about themselves is not talking about reality. They're talking about their subjective reality, which isn't real. It's this that's the site of opinion and perspective. And this is a curious intuition, and it's the intuition that has been at the center of scientific inquiry. It's the intuition that Immanuel Kant was trying to preserve upon, the sort of the existential alarm that David Hume's intervention, um, wrought upon his sort of sense of reality. And as I've sort of written about in my recent pieces, I think Kant was, well, I think like things like the categorical imperative have actually been quite fruitful methodological systems for advancing science in the rational domain. I think it makes a subtle error in the sense that it's trying to recover something that's fundamentally unrecoverable, and that is, of course, the the basic reality. And I think this is the reality, um, that like there is no uh, separation between the subject and the universe. There isn't the subjects in the universe. There's isn't you in the universe. There's just the universe, right? Is Alan Watts, uh, famously, I think, said in like one of his lectures that like when you look out from your eyes, right, and you see the happenings of nature going on, you're looking at you, the real you, that goes on with itself, right? Like and that's this, that's the Spinozan view in the sort of Western tradition, which, by the way, Albert Einstein famously was partial to, right? Einstein had a very sort of Spinozan view, right? Like there being sort of like one substance, metaphysically, versus sort of the dualist Cartesian view, that has sort of reigned supreme in quantum physics. And from the Cartesian view, we sort of get the insistence on the measurement problem, and the problem of the observer, and this kind of brings rise to the Copenhagen interpretation of Niels Bohr. And and this this thought process, is has I mean it all I mean the entire the entire academy lives within this way of thinking about it. I mean, science textbooks are written from the Cartesian dualist rationalist view. Pedagogy is designed like we teach physics, we teach philosophy. Philosophy is largely taught inside the academy, inside the Kantian method, and the Kantian method preserves the Cartesian frame, that I'm talking about. And so, I'm at a point now where I become quite confident that there's a serious intervention that's needed here, in the intellectual arts, in the and I consider myself part of the Enlightenment tradition properly. Um, that there's a prior here, right, and that prior, that that we live in a two substance universe, mind and matter, is not a prior that seems to be sustainable, even on even within the sort of like uh Cartesian rationalist view. um like we have incompleteness theorems, singularities in the math. I think Wittgenstein put paid to this. I mean, the I think the postmodernist philosophers who, I mean, I think they err when they lapse into nihilism, but I think also make a generally important point about the socially constructed nature of meaning, which also is stems from the sort of same problem. And so, yeah, I think we've reached a sort of like a point, in terms of the intellectual conversation around the basic metaphysical assumptions about the world, and about the way in which we are situated in a subject position. We always are. I mean, Einstein's theory of relativity is like is one of the I mean, one of the reasons why it can't quantize. And I've been working on a paper on this, is 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 for this very reason, right? Like it's a relativistic framework. There's in in Einstein's theory of relativity, there is no preferred rest frame. What that means is that there's no place in the universe where you stand and get an objective view. Like everything is always relative to everything else, right? This is why the theory of relativity is kind of so weird and hard to wrap your brain around, but it's also true. We know it's true, right? And it's been tested to high degrees of experimental accuracy, right? The precession of Mercury's orbit, the time drift of the clocks on GPS satellites, all consistent with the time dilation of Einstein's general theory, which sustains this idea that the subject position is always important, that you can't make a measurement without first having a subject position. But the Cartesian view says, well, I mean, you must imagine a view from nowhere. You must imagine a higher spatial plane on which to sort of look in and observe what the objective reality actually is. And this is the intuition of science. This is the intuition of the rationalist movement. That I have like I mean look, I'm not saying that like rationalists are like look, I mean, I'd rather live in a world with rationalists than most other intellectual traditions. But I mean, I think they get it wrong, right? I think they wall off this idea of the subjective being part of the real. They view it as illusory, that the subject is an illusion, that the consciousness is an illusion, that the problem that the hard problem of consciousness points at, this is this is David Chalmers's argument, right? The hard problem of consciousness. This sort of observation that you sort of have when you sort of sit in your own consciousness, that there seems to be there is something that it's called, the word is that's used by philosophers is qualia. This idea, this likeness of being. It's like it's funny, we ask the question, like, what would it be like to be you? What would it be like to be a cat? Likeness, right? And that's like that's an interesting philosophical question, more so than you might think on the surface, right? Like, because what is it likeness? It means that there's something like to be you. What is that likeness? What is that? Like, what is it? Like, what is that feeling that you're experiencing right now? The conscious experience, the totality of everything you're experiencing right now, your thoughts, your senses, the sound of my words entering your brain. Like, what is that? I mean, the more you sit with it, and especially when you step towards contemplative practice, like meditation, and you really start like going deeper here. And and if you don't like meditation, I mean, you can always explore psychedelics. Always recommended. You come to see that like there isn't just like one conscious experience. There's many different ways you can experience consciousness, and there's a likeness of it, and it's very mysterious. And in that mystery comes forth this idea of like where does this feeling of likeness come from? It doesn't seem reducible increasingly. And even neuroscientists are kind of coming to this conclusion, right? There's a whole bunch of problems in neuroscience, and this is now being talked about more openly. Is that like, there's aspects about like what we know about like the human brain, about how neural networks work, that, we have like, we have a pretty good idea how neural networks work, right, in our brain, at least in theory, right? We've used that understanding to create AI, right, like LLMs, right? That we use with ChatGPT are, an approximation of the concept of neural network that brains use. Although we know that our brain is, many orders of magnitude more complicated than the sort of the basic back propagation networks that we currently use in synthetic neural networks that's used in artificial intelligence today. But even then, right, there's like issues with like, like signaling speed and certain problems of like emergence that make it hard to sort of understand like how the conscious experience like actually happens. And this has led, and so there's like a sort of like a widening explanatory gap as we learn more here on this, both in terms on the information theory side and also on the neuroscience side. And Sam Harris, who I've written about previously, his wife Annika Harris has recently written a book about this in some detail that's worth reading. And I think here, I think we've really missed something in science, really big, for several hundreds of years, um, as a result of this sort of Cartesian instinct, this intuition pump that we've nailed into our brains as a result of this Cartesian worldview that has sort of infected the sort of the pedagogy of our Western practice. On this, I also want to say that that like I totally understand that like I don't have like a fucking PhD like in any of these things, and I'm talking from outside the academy, and there's a lot of people whose feathers get ruffled when I talk with such authority on this topic. I mean, once again, like I don't care. I mean, if anybody wants to respond to these arguments, like, look, I'm not offended that like that those quarters don't take me seriously. Like, I don't really care. I mean, they're facing their own legitimacy crisis. Turns out that the public doesn't take you seriously. So there, um, you know, I won't be joining your trust the experts campaign. But I mean, like, so I think that there's like a seriously big um big conversation that I think we have to have, right? Um, if we're going to, I think, fix our education system, which I think is like our pedagogical approaches are not adequate to the world that we're growing children into. Um, I just think that much clearer, and I have a one of the pieces that I'm writing is about this. Um, I think that um, look, I think there's too much intellectual gatekeeping in the academy. Uh, I think the peer review process at this point has become a racket. It's become a pay for play scheme. Um, uh, I think like, yeah, like it's like I mean I get that like on the other hand there's just genuinely an anti-intellectual movement on the right among fascists who want power to define truth that are also attacking the academy, and like one has to be careful here that I'm not making their argument for them, that I'm actually trying to make a constructive argument about the state of the academy, which I think is like very broken in like and I think the public at large that views the academy, Ivy League institutions as sort of closed elitist systems in which that that aren't really based on merit. They're based on relationships. When you look at these college admissions processes, when you see legacy admissions and like all these scandals that happen with like rich people like fucking paying off the board members of prestigious universities to get their kids in. I mean, it's just like, I mean, the academy is corrupt. It's just it's become a very and it's sad. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the academy, but I'll also mention that like some of my greatest heroes in history were rejected by the academy. David Hume rejected by the academy. Spinoza like thrown out of the academy. Albert Einstein like ignored by the academy for like 10 fucking years, right? The academy has a tradition actually of being very backward looking, and it likes to like trumpet itself as sort of the cradle of sort of civilization, but it's often late to the party, right? In terms of intellectual revolutions often happen outside the academy, and the academy is often very quick to dismiss you know figures like me, quite frankly, because I don't come dressed in their colors. And like I said, I'm not offended. Like, I don't care. Like, they have their own reputational, economy to manage, and I'm not managing it for them. I'm just sort of speaking openly. Like, I have no grudge against them. I mean, like, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody in the academy about this. Not shit talking them. I'd like the academy to be better. I consider this constructive feedback. So, anyways, those are my like those are kind of like my updated thoughts of sort of philosophical errata that have been knocking around my brain as I've been like writing. So yeah. Anyways, once again, I offered the sort of the live stream to my paid subscribers. Once again, if like you really want a paid subscription, cannot afford it, just DM me on Substack. I'm more than happy to comp you a subscription, and I'll see you guys out there. There's more to come. I'm planning some more stuff at Notes from the Circus as the circus becomes a much more busier place. And so for those of you who joined me live today for this recording, thanks for joining me. Look out for some of my upcoming pieces, and thank you very much. I should be looking at the camera, not at my screen. Bye bye.